You got the sweetness from the butternut squash and the maple syrup, the creaminess, the richness from the cheeses in there. Hi, my name is Carolina Gellin, and welcome to another episode of Recipe This or That, a series in which you decide what ingredients, cooking techniques, and challenges I have to incorporate in the process of developing a new recipe. According to your votes in this week's episode, I need to come up with a recipe using some type of homemade dough, butternut squash, maple syrup as our wild card, mozzarella cheese, and last but not least, the cooking technique will be baking. I don't know about you, but that to me screams like pizza, which is what I'm going to make today. I feel like pizza is a very forgiving dish considering our scenario over here. So if pineapple can go on pizza, so can butternut squash. So we're going to start with our pizza dough because we're going to have to let it proof for a little bit. We have some yeast going in. Next up, we have the lukewarm water going in. We have some maple syrup, a little drizzle of olive oil. I never measure this, it's just like a couple glugs. And now we're just gonna mix this over here. We want the yeast to completely dissolve before we add anything else in there. Next up, I have some all-purpose flour going in. Bread flour is great for this, but I figured most of us only have all-purpose flour at home, so all-purpose works too. What I like to do is give it a rough mix and then add a big pinch of kosher salt. I look like a boomer trying to record something. I'm just like, we have over here a pretty shaggy dough. We're not gonna need it, especially if you wanna let this proof overnight in the fridge to develop the flavor even further. I highly recommend you skip the kneading process. What I'm gonna do is just bring the dough together. So I'm just greasing my hands with a little bit more olive oil. Pop this over here, fold this around and do this around until there are no more dry spots. So we're just pinching the dough here, and now we're gonna flip it over, drag the dough towards us to essentially seal that pinch. We're gonna grab the same bowl we mixed this in, we're gonna grease it up with a little bit more olive oil. Again, a couple of glugs. This is where we pinched it, so the pinch side is gonna go down in the bowl. I like to grease it up on each side. So you're going to want to give your dough about 2 hours at room temperature in a warm spot. I really like proofing this dough overnight. I made this dough before and proofed it for 6 days in the fridge. It was still good. That yeasty taste really comes through after 6 days in the fridge. Here's our dough after 24 hours in the fridge. This is the most satisfying part when it comes to the dough, is deflating it. Those bubbles. You're gonna get your dough, place this over here. So you want to flatten the dough, then we're gonna divide it. I think I'm gonna divide it into 4. I'm gonna get my bench scraper and simply divide this. You don't have to measure it, you don't have to weigh this down or anything. You can if you want to. Just like that. So you just want to shape it again into a ball. And there we have it, a small little pizza dough. You want to give this like a 10 to 15 minute rest on your work surface because we worked it so hard, like we pulled the gluten strands back, we stretched the dough and everything. It's going to be much harder to roll it out right now. So you want to either oil them, either flour them. It's really up to you because the air exposure will cause the dough to dry out on the surface. And then whenever you roll out, you're going to have like a weird crust. Next up, we're going to take care of our butternut squash. I'm going to add some olive oil to a pan over here. So I already sliced the butternut squash. I left the skin on. You can peel off the skin. I really don't mind the skin. It's edible as long as you wash it. I feel like it adds like a nice textural effect in there. I'm just putting the slices in here. We have some cayenne over here, which is beautiful. This is a very, very spicy cayenne I get at this specialty store. Next, I have some coriander seeds over here. We have the wild card, which is the maple syrup, and I feel like the maple syrup will really bring that sweetness and caramelization to the very next level. I'm going in with some salt. This is just some kosher salt. So last but not least, the freshly ground black pepper. Simply massage the spices in, making sure the squash is coated in the minimal spices we have on here. And once that's done, we're simply going to evenly spread them out on the baking sheet. We're gonna bake this at 425 Fahrenheit or 220 Celsius until they're nice and roasty toasty. I don't wanna go overboard with the caramelization of these because they're gonna continue to cook on the pizza, which will probably end up broiling. So you just want them to soften and cook all the way through, but don't go crazy on the other stuff. So we're back. Our butternut squash is beautifully roasted. The pieces we sliced a little bit thinner than 1/2 centimeter have candied and they're so delicious. I'm very glad I kept the spices pretty simple because that pepper is so fragrant and it complements the maple syrup so well. It almost gives off like a smoky flavor to the whole butternut squash. It's beautiful. I'm gonna share with you a little trick to get your pizza crunchy and crispy on the bottom using your home oven. You don't have to have like a special pizza oven. The trick is pretty self-explanatory. It doesn't use a pizza stone, which totally works. Like if you have that, good for you. But if you don't, you probably have a cast iron skillet, which works just as well. So I'm gonna show you how to use that. But before that, let's just get to the dough. I think this one's a little bit too big for my cast iron skillet, so I'm gonna divide it in half. I don't want like a doughy pizza dough. I like a thin crust. I don't know about you, but I'm a thin crust girl. So because our ovens aren't as powerful at home, what I do is I bake the dough first, then I take it out and I add the toppings and whatnot, and I let it completely cook and everything after that. Just make sure it's covered in flour. You don't want this to stick to your surface. I'm gonna take the dough, lift it up, and simply let gravity do its thing. I'm stretching it here and there, but otherwise, see, it's just gonna like naturally stretch down. Let me get myself ready. Okay, that's pretty good. Okay, that's pretty good. Wait a minute, that was pretty good. I'm gonna get my parchment paper over here. What I also do, I add a pinch of cornmeal. I'm actually gonna brush a little maple syrup on the bottom of the pizza, and as it bakes, it should caramelize quite a bit. Our oven is at a pretty high temperature. It's currently at 450 Fahrenheit, which is like 240 something Celsius. So I have a cast iron skillet that I usually like to flip and place the pizza here just because it gives us like a flat surface. This thing's very hot. Ooh, it is very hot. Anyways, so you take the pizza. I do this with pitas too. And you place it over there. Maybe give it like one last stretch. And already see how the dough started to bubble up and rise up because of the residual heat on the cast iron skillet. And just place it like that. And we're gonna give it some time. Let me turn on my oven lights so I can keep an eye on it. Oh, let me show you the bubbles. You need to see the bubbles. How much was that? Like 2 seconds? Check out these crazy bubbles on this pizza. Are you kidding me? Look at that. I don't know if you're able to tell. Look at that. That is crazy. Beautiful. So I pulled the pizza out the oven. I'm gonna place it right over here. It's very light and airy and fluffy. You can already see like how sturdy the bottom is. Just lay it over here and add all the toppings on it. We're gonna start with some ricotta cheese over here, just like a thinner layer. And then we have some shredded mozzarella cheese. Just like that. This one's gonna get like nice and gooey in there. Then I have some shallots over here that I thinly sliced. You can use regular onion, red onion, yellow, whatever you have on hand. Beautiful. Then I have some thinly sliced garlic. I'm gonna go in with the butternut squash. I'm actually gonna tear this by hand. I feel like that's gonna give it like a nice rustic look to it all. I'm also going to add some of these peppercorns and coriander seeds on top of the pizza. I feel like that's gonna add a nice crunchy element in there, and they're so tasty. Next, I'm going in with some olive oil, just like a nice little shy glug. A little salt, a little salty salt. I'm also going in with some maple syrup, like just again a shy little drizzle here and there, just like the olive oil. And now I'm just gonna lift this up, place it over here, and now we're gonna broil everything until nice and melty. Our pizza is very much ready. It smells amazing. I burned some of the maple syrup, like just a tiny bit. I'm gonna get my microphone closer. Look at that. Look at how airy and fluffy that crust looks. I don't know how to explain this, but everything you could possibly want is in here. Like, you got the sweetness from the butternut squash and the maple syrup, the creaminess, the richness from the cheeses in there, the spice from that pepper. It's so well balanced and everything works so well with each other. I don't think I've ever had a pizza like this ever before. I'm just telling you, it works. It really, really works, and I want you to try this. And if you do, please tag me and share pictures with me because I want to hear what you think. Thank you for watching this episode of Recipe This or That. I was your host, Carolina Gellin, and I'll see you next time.